former Australian reservist entertains his men. It's a relaxed, casual scene, utterly at odds with the conflict zone outside these walls. The bitterly divided Balkans, and a war full of history, hate and horror. Kapetan Dragan is playing his part. But what precisely would that be? From this side of a very dark divide, it's the role of hero, daring conqueror of the enemy, compassionate and honourable soldier.
I love the man, but so does the Serbian people.
From the other side, it's the role of callous and vindictive villain, the role of a war criminal.
Primitive style.
Tonight, a special investigation, the case for and against Kapetan Dragan. Hello and welcome to Foreign Correspondent. I'm Mark Corcoran. He sits in Sydney's Silverwater prison with few creature comforts, except for his well-worn acoustic guitar. An Australian citizen accused of many things, but facing no actual charges. For Dragan Vasilkovic, it could perhaps be worse. The prospect of a trial and prison in Croatia is a fate he's trying to avoid at all costs. Soon as expected, a federal minister will decide if Vasilkovic's extradition and sensational war crimes case will proceed. But who is this man and what has he done? Well, that depends very much on who you talk to. Reporter Trevor Borman has journeyed throughout the Balkans to investigate the real story of Dragan Vasilkovic.
The medieval fortress of Knin in Croatia has a history of conflict and bloodletting, including a war in the early 1990s. This was the domain of Serbian paramilitary captain Dragan Vasilkovic, who became a national hero for his deeds. He's a man of many faces. Dragan Vasilkovic is an Australian citizen, a golf instructor, ocean yachtsman and aviator, and a man who also goes by the name of Daniel Snedden.
Very much a patriot. I mean, he even changed his name to an Australian politician, for Christ's sakes.
But in Croatia, he's a wanted man, an alleged war criminal whose men are accused of torture and murder during the Balkans War.
All those who committed crimes, serious crimes, must be punished and must be found.
The events on this hilltop fort almost 20 years ago may well be played out in a war crimes trial not far from here. But before that's possible, the Croatians need their man. Kapetan Dragan Vasilkovic, or Daniel Snedden, is a long way away. He's in a maximum security jail in Sydney and fighting with every means he has to avoid facing his accusers.
They've got the wrong man. They're looking for... It's just totally wrong what they've done and unfair.
The people of Serbia revere their patriots, and in the early 1990s, there were few more admired than Kapetan Dragan.
He was a natural-born leader. He cared about what he did. Very adventurous, full of life, never afraid to try anything.
The man who immigrated to Australia as a 14-year-old boy was back in his homeland as the former Yugoslavia was falling apart. Driven to support the Serbs in Croatia, he organised and trained a local police force in the Serb-dominated Krajina region. They were military skills honed from 4 years in the Australian Army Reserve.
Discipline played a big part, and I mean, brought them together as a unit. And honour. That's something that was instilled in him for the military in Australia.
Croatia's declaration of independence in 1991 saw the beginning of a bitter war, and Captain Dragan Vasilkovic would train ragtag Serb civilians and lead them on operations against the Croats. The town of Glina still bears its battle scars. Hundreds died here in savage fighting. The Croatians claim Captain Dragan's men fired on homes and schools as residents were fleeing, then looted their properties. Darko Kauric surveys the remains of the police station from where he served. He was taken prisoner by Dragan's troops early in the war.
Njegovi specijalci koji su nas otprilike 2 tjedna dok smo se nalazili u Golubiću maltretirali, psihofizički zlostavljali, vodili nas na tobožnje strijeljanje kako bi nas uplašili i psihički što više uništili.
What happened here came to be regarded by the Croatians as a war crime. At the time, Captain Dragan was clear in his own mind about what constituted a target. When the Croats used police stations and hospitals as fortifications, he said, "I'm sorry, I just have to massacre them."
In Serbia, he would become a figure immortalised in comic books, courted for television appearances, sung about, painted, and soon credited for his philanthropic work. With Belgrade at war, Dragan Vasilkovic would launch a charity to teach computer skills to the wounded and offer welfare to compatriots.
So I started this foundation. 10 years later, we have helped over 67,000 people. And they're not ordinary people, they're victims of war. They were doing some public opinion polls, and I was the most popular person in the country at the time.
But the lure of battle would draw Dragan Vasilkovic back to Croatia, where the Serbs had declared the Krajina to be their own republic. From the citadel above the town of Kanin, he became the enforcer with the men he called his Kaninjas. Former Croatian policeman Velibor Bracic and fellow officers returned to their living hell, the dank, claustrophobic cell where they claim guards interrogated and tortured them for several weeks.
Znači, ćelija je bila mračna, vlažna, znači kondenzacija, pošto je nas već 5 unutra bilo, pošto smo mi unutra i vršili, znači, nuždu.
Onda bi cijev od automatske puške vam ugurao u usta, a onda bi ovako na obaraču mu prst drhtao i tako. Tako da je bilo izvođenja kao vodimo vas na streljanje.
Velibor Bracic says he endured torture that included electric shocks with wires attached to his genitals, and he can never forget the day Captain Dragan arrived during an interrogation.
I onda je on došao, kaže, bre, već ako ga tučete, kaže, onda se to radi ovako. Onda me potegao, razbio mi je ovo sve, nos, ovo mi je bilo sve zatvoreno, krv je procurila i to još me udario doli kad sam pao na pod par puta. I onda su došli stražari, pokupli me, rekao, vodite Ustašu.
Rijetkost je bio ko nije učestvovao u tome.
Another Croatian prisoner to share this cell was Vikica Plivilic. This is German news footage of him soon after his arrest. With Dragan Vasilkovic in the room, he's offered a beer and tells the crew he's being treated humanely. Vikica Plivilic says he was beaten in the days before and after his television appearance, but his tormentors avoided striking his face, so there'd be no apparent bruising. Kapetan Dragan, it seems, went to great lengths to show he was merciful.
I would not tolerate any ill treatment of prisoners, that I would not tolerate any ill treatment of civilians. Every time we liberated or conquered, again, depends which way you look at it, a village or a town or a city, the very first thing I've done, I immediately secured all the civilians, made sure they got all the food, medical treatment, and security around them.
In his studio on the outskirts of Belgrade, Dusan Vukajevic's art captures landscapes ravaged by war 20 years ago.
Jedina jedinica koja sam vjerovao do kraja je bila jedinica kapetana Dragana. Ona je imala određene moralne kodekse koji su se morali bespogovorno poštovati.
Kapetan Dragan's former mine layer paid a shocking price for his service, but he's a man eternally loyal.
Mogu uvijek da tvrdim da nikada nisam čuo o bilo kakvom nedostojnom postupku kapetana Dragana.
One nation's hero is another country's villain in this part of the world. In the Croatian capital of Zagreb, lawyer Maja Rakic from the prosecutor's office has an ambitious brief to persuade Canberra to hand over an Australian citizen to face a war crimes trial.
There are 2 war crimes against prisoners of wars and 1 crime against the civilian population. As a result of these offences, several people were also killed.
Both Croatia and Serbia run war crimes courts. They each try Croats and Serbs. The governments of both countries say they can only move on with reconciliation if the crimes in the wars of the 1990s are dealt with.
It is very important to bring all the war criminals to justice. This is the common goal of all the countries in the region. This is our perspective for the better future.
But for much of the last 4 years, Dragan Vasilkovic, alias Daniel Snedden, has languished in Sydney's Parkley and Silverwater prisons without facing any charges at all. His fate now lies with the Federal Home Affairs Minister, Brendan O'Connor, who must decide whether he be freed or dispatched to Croatia for trial. Seemingly a world away from the Balkans, his most fervent supporter lives on a farm near the New South Wales town of Coffs Harbour.
Ooh, that's it. Well, I first made contact with him indirectly through my father, and my dad would always say, you know, he's a man of honour, he's someone that I respect. This is the photograph that I carried in my wallet for 15 years.
Nada Lukic-Bruce was a social worker from the Serbian community who met Kapetan Dragan in jail, fell for him and married him.
A man of discipline. He was a professional as far as a soldier was concerned. This talk about him being a war criminal is just absolutely ridiculous. I love the man, but so does the Serbian people. And I think that's the bond that links us more than anything, in that the fight for justice, the fight for truth, and the fight to fairness, you know, to be Australian, to have a fair go.
The fight to free Captain Dragan has become the fixation of Australia's Serbian community.
Serbs for Justice arose out of a crisis when Captain Dragan was arrested.
Its fundraisers have contributed $500,000 to his legal defence, and Dragan Vasilkovic has had his victories. Last September, almost 4 years after his arrest, the full bench of the federal court found that if Dragan Vasilkovic was returned to Croatia, he would not get a fair trial, that there was substantial or real chance of prejudice. Captain Dragan was a free man.
Well, as an innocent man after spending 4 years incarcerated with the convicted criminals without any charges, any convictions, or any even superficial evidence against me, disgusted. However, thank God there are still some honest judges around, and their unanimous decision to have me released.
In Sydney, he was feted by his community, as he once was in Belgrade.
Ladies and gentlemen, I truly thank you for standing by me in the past 4 years. 4 years on a death row. The justice system has ruled that the state of Croatia has a corrupt justice system.
And always with him in spirit, the leaders of the Serbian Orthodox Church.
We thank God for all of those who have given their time, their monies, and their valiant efforts in securing the release of our honored and esteemed guest for this evening, Captain Dragan.
But the triumph of Dragan Vasilkovic was short-lived. In March, the High Court overruled the decision. After a few months of freedom, he was back in jail again, facing extradition.
What fate awaits him in Croatia?
He will not be treated fairly, and there'll be some accident. Oh, poor thing, they shot him. He was trying to escape. What rot. If the minister does make the decision to extradite him, we will continue to appeal.
Dragan Vasilkovic's desperate quest for freedom has taken many turns. The extradition bid was launched by then Croatian Justice Minister Vesna Skerios-Bolt, a woman Vasilkovic supporters accuse of launching a witch hunt. It's a matter that's become deeply personal.
Captain Dragan wrote a series of letters to you. He said to you that he's no more a war criminal than you are a whore.
When you are a public person, then when you get such a letter, you can't do anything, I mean.
So what do you think of a man that would say that?
Primitive style.
Basically, he called her a whore. And I said to him, why did you say that? And he says, well, Nada, it's the truth.
What did he mean by that?
In that she is a whore.
What, she's promiscuous?
Well, what's your meaning of a whore?
Dragan Vasilkovic saw it as his military mission to train Serbian fighters, and over the years, several thousand men and women came under his influence. But there are claims against Captain Dragan that go beyond the Croatian extradition warrant. They involve his exploits in neighbouring Bosnia and the town of Zvornik.
Dragan Vasilkovic admits he came to Zvornik. His story is that he arrived not wearing military gear, but civilian clothes. He said he was here to open a local branch of his charity. But local Bosnian Muslims have a very different version of events, and their stories are shocking.
It was 1992 and Bosnian Muslims were being driven out of their towns and homes in what the international community would come to regard as ethnic cleansing. Thousands would be murdered. In the chaos, a woman speaks to the camera. Jamila Subasic would claim that 2 months later she was captured by Serbs and held in a rape camp. This is her today. She's a broken woman who says she can never recover from the ordeal.
I zašto? Znači, nema dana, nema noći, nema jutra, nema momenta jednog da ja o tome ne razmišljam.
During operations in Bosnia, it's claimed Kapetan Dragan and his men stayed in this hotel in the town of Zvornik. Jamila Subasic says she and other women were being held prisoner elsewhere and were taken to the hotel to be sexually assaulted. She says she was raped by Dragan Vasilkovic on 6 or 7 occasions.
Onda ja njemu kažem kao molim te, nemoj me dirat. Eto, ubij me sad, ali me nemoj dirat. Rekao, na Liplju, ja sam njemu rekla da sam silovana, već na Liplju bila. A on kaže, pa gdje može jedan Srbin, mogu svi.
I showed her a photograph of Dragan Vasilkovic.
Jeste, tu je kapetan Dragan što je mene silovao. I ne samo mene, nego mnoge žene.
She also recognises another man from the photo who called Kapetan Dragan the Prince.
On mi je rekao da imam čast da me princ izabru za sebe.
Jamila Subasic claims she and others saw the bodies of Muslim men floating in the river below. She claims they'd been murdered in the hotel basement.
On je došao te 4. noći, sav krvav i nož u rukama je nosio. Otišao je tamo da se opere i kaže, ja smijem mu pripiti riječ njegovu. On kaže, jebat ćemo vam majku svima, sve ćemo vas pobiti, neće niko ostati živ, nećete preživjeti da možete pričati.
Their claims Dragan Vasilkovic strenuously denies. Support for the former paramilitary leader seems to have no bounds to this day in modern Serbia. Even royalty rallies to his cause.
A lot of us will go out of our way not to fall out with our neighbour.
Her Royal Highness Princess Linda of Serbia. Her father-in-law was the last king of Yugoslavia. Of American and English origin, she met her husband Prince Tomislav while he was in exile in the United Kingdom.
My husband, actually, who travelled extensively through the war zones and the remote areas of Krajina and Bosnia and so on, he actually, I remember he used to tell me about Kapetan Dragan as someone who he felt had great integrity.
But Kapetan Dragan was accused of raping a woman in Zvornik. Do you think that actually happened?
What would he want to go and rape someone for when he had potentially all the prettiest girls in Serbia there? You know what I mean? And I know, I used to watch the women when he would appear at something, and the women just, I think they would have, the unmarried ones, of course, not attached, I'm sure, you know. But I never got the impression he was that sort of character at all.
In Belgrade's Orthodox Cathedral, they've prayed more than once in support of the man they see as a victim of a great injustice. Dragan Vasilkovic was never accused of war crimes in The Hague, and his campaigners say the Croatians have not supplied any evidence to Australian officials in support of his extradition. Kapetan Dragan's spiritual guiding father, Peter Lukic, can only attest to the character of the man he knows.
a život nije bio prema njemu baš naklonjen, ali se on izborio i našao svoj put do Gospoda Boga. Možda bi trebalo da znaju organi vlasti u Australiji i australijski građani koji to prate, da kapetan Dragan nije samo bio dobar vojnik, a ja ću da kažem i častan vojnik.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
If anybody met Daniel, if anybody would sit and talk to him and see the man that he is, they would see that he is not a war criminal, that he would never have committed any offences against Geneva Convention. Never. So where is the fair go for Daniel? Where is justice for Daniel?
It's now very much a tourist town on the Croatian coast, but the port of Šibenik may well be jolted back to its recent bloody past. The local court could well be the venue for the trial of Dragan Vasilkovic if Australia decides to send him back. It will be a case closely scrutinised by the international community. Dragan Vasilkovic will be tried by a judge alone and be able to call his own witnesses.
Nobody can have any fear that trial will be political. It will be a very honest trial. These crimes were committed in Croatia and it will be in Croatia. It will be very, very professional trial.
Trevor Borman and the case for and against Captain Dragan Vasilkovic. We've prepared detailed online companion coverage of this story, featuring key documents and extended interviews with key players, both supporters and accusers. You'll find it all on the Foreign Correspondent website or on the main ABC News site. Plenty of interesting information there. Well, that's the program for tonight. We'll see you again soon. Good night.